Katherine Veran, the CEO of Safe Futures. I've been here for 30 years and the last 7 as the CEO. I'll share a little bit more about myself, but I'm going to turn it over to Ken to introduce himself.
Thank you. So my name is Ken Edwards, and I have the distinction, I don't think I'm wrong with this, of having the longest affiliation with Safe Futures of any other volunteer or employee. So my affiliation with Safe Futures probably goes back 35, 36 years. And it started as a 19-year-old kid being sworn into the New London Police Department and getting bad info, but we'll get to that in a minute. They've kept me involved ever since, part because of the mission, of course, but also because of the people. The dedication of the employees and volunteers is what keeps me involved in Safe Futures. They deserve the support that, the little bit of support that I can give. So.
It's a lot.
Quite a bit of support.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Marie Kenny, and I am the project coordinator for the Center for Safe Futures, which we'll be hearing about tonight, so thank you for joining us.
So, as I said, I've been here 30 years. I came to Safe Futures 30 years ago when my dear friend and peer from corporate banking was brutally murdered by her husband. And we had all been out the night before celebrating her birthday, and he joined us. And I thought they were an amazing couple. She was brilliant, funny, smart. And so when I got the news, I was horrified. And I changed my career path shortly after. And I have never looked back. It's never been a job. It's been a mission. And I do that for Susan. But Safe Futures started 48 years ago as the Women's Center of Southeastern Connecticut, as a hotline and then a shelter. And we have grown tremendously. I'm going to have Marie change the slide up there. So we've grown tremendously, especially over the last 5-7 years, from serving about 5,000 victims a year to 10,000 victims a year. And we do that by removing any barrier, all barriers that victims face. One barrier I'm going to focus on, especially tonight, and the need for the center, is the Family Justice Center model. 20 of my years with Safe Futures, I worked in the court system. And 35% of the criminal docket are domestic violence cases. That, for us in New London and Norwich, because we serve all of Southeastern Connecticut, is about 5,000 victims a year that we're working with in court. And those are just the arrests. Those are not the unreported domestic violence incidences. And victims coming to court, court cases can go on for 2 years. They have to attend many court dates. They have to find transportation. They have to work with their children. They can't bring the children into the court. There's so many barriers that we set up, that our systems set up, and not intentionally, but to work with victims, that they have to go from place to place to place over and over and over again. And I would work with, just an example of one particular victim, for 2 years. And she would give her input every time there was a court date, and she would be there. Then she almost lost her job because she couldn't take the time off. And then it got to a point she just said, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. So, going into the court and saying the victim wouldn't be there, and the feel in the court is, well, they're not cooperating. And that's not, it's not the fault of the people, it's just how our system is. So if you look on the screen and you see many of our different programs, victims face barriers coming into every one of these programs. They face barriers if they have pets. Many agencies do not take pets in their programs. Safe Futures is the only one, or the first one to start in Connecticut, and it's one of the only ones that still takes pets in every program, because pets are part of a family, and they're a barrier for children and a barrier for a victim to leave. We have 7 different housing programs. Our hotlines, everything's free and confidential. And just to give you an idea, another program we do is the lethality assessment program. And I want to highlight this one because we know how well partnerships work. We have done the lethality assessment program with every one of our police departments in Southeastern Connecticut. That's our state police, our tribal police, and every municipal police department. And they volunteer on an MOU to do this. But at the scene of an incident, they will assess a victim at risk of being murdered with a tool, not just reoffended, but murdered, and connect them immediately to our services, right to our specialized line for them. It can be 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, and we're working directly with that victim. We're able to have that confidential conversation. The officer walks away and lets them speak, and then we make arrangements for them to either come in or do their safety plan for the next 24 hours. Prior to doing this program, it's documented that there are, out of 65% of the victims who were involved with law enforcement prior, only 4% availed services. Because it's such a traumatizing time to think about, who do I call? You get a list of paper, there's all these numbers on it. You're in trauma, you're in shock. You didn't expect the police to be there maybe a half hour before. Doing this program, 80% of the victims come into services. So we know partnerships work. The whole model of the center is to bring all of these agencies together in a collaborative to work to serve those 10,000 victims. The other thing I looked at over and over was our census. And in Southeastern Connecticut, with our census, we think we're doing great serving 10,000 victims a year. It should be closer to 25,000 victims a year. So how do we do that? I think I touched on that. Okay. So I just want to talk about the conference. So we did a lot of research on what models would work. I kept looking over and over again, what models would really work for our victims. And in California, back in the early 2000s, they started what's called the Family Justice Centers. Multiple agencies co-located at the time, and many still are. They're in municipal buildings, it may be courthouses, but multiple agencies located together. And the gurus who started this was Gail Strack and Casey Gwynn. They were prosecutors out of California prosecuting cases and saying, what are we missing here, right? What are we missing? And it was all the partners. They needed information, everybody working together. So we brought them here. Back in 2020, and I'm going to say the dates. It was March 12th and March 13th. If they sound familiar to anybody. We had 166 community partners registered to come to a local college who was hosting us to do a strategic planning 2-day conference. And on the cusp, Wednesday afternoon, Ken and I were actually at the college setting up, looking at the design, and the board of directors called and said, we're shutting down the college. And I had just picked up Casey and Gail at the airport from California, and we looked at each other, and what did we do immediately? Talk about a partner? We just started calling and texting people, who can take us? Who can take us? And I'll give a shout out to one of our partners in the community, Philomena's Restaurant. Mike Bassetto said, his exact words were, I got you, buddy. I said, Mike, you don't understand. It's 2 days, breakfast, lunch, maybe 100 people or so. I got you, buddy. And by that next morning, everybody was there. And I always say there were 99 people in the room because the governor had just announced that you couldn't have more than 100 people in the room, so we just didn't count past there. But all of these people, all of these partners worked together to create this plan, our vision. But what did our vision look like? You know, we always thought it would be downtown New London. And what came out of that strategic planning conference? You're not in a central location. To the 21 towns and cities and tribes that you serve, downtown New London is not a central location. So we started looking at that. What agencies needed to be working together? And we started forming our building committee and started looking for property after we were given left a bequest. And then 2 properties that were donated to us to be sold because the owners of them loved this vision. And we were able to purchase 11 acres in Waterford, at a central location on Route 85 between 95, 395. It's easy access for everyone. And then bringing more partners in to form that building committee and get advice. We were told, you know, you really need to have seat bus there. So we reached out to seat bus because they said they don't go any farther than, I think it was the Crossroads. So we reached out and they said, well, you need to have, the driveway needs to be, you know, large enough circular, but it also has to be able to sustain the weight of the bus. So our engineers were able to work with that. So there were so many of our partners every day still work with us. So the vision, okay.
We bought a Christmas tree farm. Is what it comes down to.
And I have to say, when we presented this to the board, that was my interview.
So 85, Dunkin' Donuts would be over here. This is the end. Oh, I'm so sorry. This is the entrance, and then it goes out in a big. And this back here is juvenile court. It touches the juvenile court, and comes back this way. So you're seeing about a third of it cleared with the small Christmas trees. The rest of it is up the hill and wooded.
And a big shout out to Ken for getting this video for us.
That's me.
So I have to say, our board of directors, our committees were very, very fortunate to have visionaries on our board, committed people on our board, and they love this idea. So they've been promoting it throughout this whole process. The design of the building, as you can see, the driveway, you can see where it's located. It's situated in back on the lot. And that'll be the outside.
I've never seen that effect.
Ta-da! The other part of the design of the building is some of the, again, our partners on our building committees and our board said, you know, some of the problems with building a building and not having it, the foundation strong enough to put on a second floor later on, is a challenge. So we went right back to the architect and said, okay, we need to design it to hold the second floor. Should we need to add up? Because what I hear from doing this work and family justice centers around the nation and actually international, is that when you open, you need more room. So we are prepared for that. We are prepared for that. But I do want to, on this, can I get up and?
You need to bring the microphone with you.
Okay. Because this is the most exciting piece. This is my dream. Sure.
No, you're good.
Okay, you can hear me. Okay, so this building is situated on an angle. And right here, this whole front part, this is our law enforcement, our state's attorneys, our virtual courtroom. Imagine a victim not having to go to court and face their abuser. They can be here in a virtual courtroom. Imagine law enforcement be able to see anyone who drives in there. So think of the security that we will have at this property, as well as there'll be there like a substation at night. So there will be somebody there all the time. The entrance, everything is hope-centered, trauma-centered. It's focused on victims and children. And we have a Voices Committee, Marie will mention to you about who guide us through this process also, survivors. And then Safe Futures is here. And then here are all of our partners, multiple partners. Oops, I forgot. Multiple partners co-located working together. And one of our partners is here right now from New London Adult Education. She's been a partner from the beginning on our steering committee. Thank you, Denise. And then we have children's play areas. That's another barrier that victims face coming for services, coming to meet with a state's attorney, going into the courtroom, all the things that victims have to do, meeting with all the other partners. They can't bring their children. Or do you really want the children listening to everything? This will be play areas, it'll be educational, and one of our partners on the steering committee, Riverfront Children's Center, We have grants with them for certifying our staff and their staff. They will be helping us set this up. Everything we're doing is based on with our community partners. There'll be training rooms, an industrial kitchen for training, but also multi-purpose for if there's events there. And it just goes on and on. There's a chapel, there is an essentials boutique, and a food pantry and cafe that United Way will be supplying for us, a courtyard, meeting rooms, but all focused on trauma-informed, hope-centered services for families and children. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next most important thing. I have never written a $5 million bond before. So to think it would even get approved, I was ecstatic because every one of our state legislators, our state reps, our senators, everyone signed on to this, and our state rep Holly Cheeseman on the bond commission endorsed it, and we received a $5 million bond towards the construction of this building. We're very excited. We have our capital campaign going on, and we want to break ground in the next few months. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Marie.
I'll use this. Thank you. So the good news is there are so many partners in the community who want to be a part of this new initiative, that we're getting all sorts of perspectives and guidance that is really making this what will be a national model. But we have to figure it out. How do all these people with their own employers work in one place as a cohesive team? And so the first step was Kathy worked with our partners to create a steering committee to kind of oversee and guide the whole planning process. And you can see the different agencies and organizations who are represented on this. We have an incredible team that is working. They meet every month. They've been meeting since 2021, the spring of 2021, and we're just getting great feedback and input and support. And also the members of this steering committee have invited, assigned, voluntold, I'm not sure how to do it, but their staff are on the working groups that are doing kind of the nuts and bolts planning. And I'll talk a little bit about those. So we have a community engagement working group that helped come up with the idea for these kinds of outreach programs, came up with our elevator pitch, which has been used in our grants and our bond application and with our capital campaign, and helping us come up with a plan to get the word out about who Safe Futures is and what this new model really means for survivors in Southeastern Connecticut. The operations working group is looking at kind of a 30,000-foot perspective to see how do we create a cohesive work culture, and how do we collaborate when everyone has their own rules around confidentiality and what they can share and cannot share. So we've got members of the committee are staff at some of our partner agencies. We also have a couple just community members who are HR professionals, because we need that perspective, and we don't have that skill set, or certainly I don't have that skill set. So we're fortunate enough that they volunteer to be a part of this committee to help us map this all out. The service delivery working group is really looking at the ground level. Who needs to be in the building delivering services, and how do we then work together? What kind of, how do we share information? How do we keep information but kind of silo it so that only the people who the client has given consent to share certain information, only that information is shared. So the service delivery working group has come up with confidentiality statements, release of information waivers, and also brainstormed who needs to be a part of this program. One of the things on the floor plan is there are some office spaces that are not assigned and won't have a permanent staff person assigned to it, because there are partners, some smaller agencies, who want to be a part of this and who our clients need to work with, but it doesn't make sense for them to assign someone to the building full time. Maybe they'll come 2 Tuesdays a month, or they'll come as needed. So we will have the opportunity, we'll have some flexible space available for partners who will not be full-time in the building. And service delivery is also helping us look at how do we get feedback from the clients to make sure that we're delivering the services. As Kathy said, this is all very hope-centered and survivor-driven. We need to be held accountable to those standards. And so the service delivery is helping us come up with ways to get really reliable feedback from the people we're serving, that we're doing what we say we will do, and we're doing what they need us to do. And also, who else might we need to bring into this partnership? The building committee has been working since before we found the land, and been working with the architect and the engineer for the last year and a half or so.
Probably a little more.
2 years, to fine tune, like even the slide here is a little bit outdated of our floor plan that you saw, but the posters in the back are up to date. Because as we learn more, we tweak it and fine tune the floor plan. So the building committee has been incredibly helpful in making sure we're anticipating what we need to have in the building for IT, for security, for the feel. We want this to, you notice the sketches, it doesn't look like an industrial building. It looks like a home. We want it to feel warm and comfortable and safe. And so the building committee is addressing all of those. Court support services will look at both criminal, supporting clients through the criminal system, but also the family and civil system. So the virtual courtroom, for instance, when a victim requests in a timely manner to have the restraining order hearing to be allowed to present from a remote location, the courts are allowing that. That's since COVID, they've allowed that change to stay. So we'll be able to do those hearings from the center, from the virtual courtroom, with the child in the play area being well cared for, and the client being well supported by whoever in the building they need with them at the time. So the court support services will look at from the criminal court perspective, but also the civil court perspective. And funding and sustainability will be a group of partners. We're working right now with Child and Family Agency. We have a grant from CCADV, the Statewide Domestic Violence Coalition. They're applying for another grant so that we can be sure that they have an advocate who will be able to be full-time in this building. So the partners will be figuring out let me back up a minute. There was some resistance, as much sense as this model makes, there was a lot of resistance, especially in the advocacy and nonprofit community, when family justice centers first started popping up. Most of them were starting out of DA's offices. And the nonprofits were cautious. We don't get enough money as it is. Are the DA's offices, are the mayor's offices, are the sheriff's departments and police, are they gonna start cutting into our limited funds? The Alliance for Hope, which is they're providing the technical advice for us in going through this project, they're emphatic that this is not about cutting into one another's pieces of the pie. This is about finding a bigger pie and making the pie bigger. So by working with our partners to look at new ways of finding funding, we're not going to be stepping on each other's toes. We're not competing with one another. In fact, when we sent requests for the bond money and for ARPA money from the towns, everyone on that steering committee signed on a letter of approval supporting our request for money from the towns through ARPA, because we were not competing with any money they were also asking for. And we would support them in their applications as well. So it really is about, and quite frankly, funders are more interested now in seeing partnerships, and not just paper partnerships where people say they're working together, but really, truly collaborative models, and that's what this will be. So each of these working groups then comes up with, well, here's what we think and here's what we recommend. And then it goes to the steering committee, which again is the CEOs and the leaders of these agencies. And then once the steering committee nails down what they think the recommendation should be, it goes to the Safe Futures Board of Directors, who has ultimate oversight over the whole project, which is, Kathy alluded earlier, it is a different model because we're not, the Family Justice Center, the lead agency is not a municipality, it's a domestic violence agency. And one of the key benefits to that is our mission will never change. If a new mayor gets elected, that mayor may or not be as committed to this model of service delivery, or the police chief, or whoever it is. But Safe Futures, our mission is going to be our mission. And so it is important that our board of directors have oversight to ensure that we are, number one, accountable to the survivors we serve, not to anyone else. So it really is a phenomenal model. Voices Committee. This is one of my favorite parts about my job, to be perfectly honest. So this is a group of survivors. And again, the Alliance for Hope has the Family Justice Center Alliance, and they're providing us the technical assistance to create and establish a Family Justice Center model. But they do really strongly recommend certain programs that any Family Justice Center also have these programs. One is the Voices Committee, and that's a group of survivors. It is for survivors who are no longer in danger and no longer in crisis, because it's not a support group. It is a real working group. And so it is important that people are appropriately placed on the committee. But we have this amazing group, and they are giving us ideas about, for instance, I talked about artwork in the building, and they universally said, please, no black and white pictures of someone crying with their hand over her face. They want hopeful, joyful, inspirational art. The other thing, we don't want to wait until this building is open for us to start improving how we deliver services and how we work with our partners. So we have launched what's called a phased opening, where we have just a couple of the partners from that steering committee already practicing the universal intake form, the referral process, things like that. And when it came to the steering committee to figure out who should be the first 2 or 3 agencies in this launch, soft launch, immediately they said, ask the Voices Committee. And so at the next Voices Committee meeting, we asked them, who do you wish you could have talked to when you first thought about talking to someone? And they said, we wish we had help with restraining orders, and we wish we had had access to mental health services for us and for our children, for whoever had children. So as a result of their feedback, Safe Futures, Sound Community Services, and Child and Family Agency are the first 3 in this soft launch. And we have already learned so much about, we've made changes to the forms, we've made changes to the process. We've learned a lot about one another. The agencies have learned a lot about one another in this process. So the Voices Committee will continue to guide us and make sure we are accountable, first and foremost, to survivors. This is an amazing group. 2 of them are active on the National Voices Network, and another one serves on the statewide Survivor Leadership Council. 4 of them have been invited to speak on national webinars that have been viewed by 400 to 500 people each. We really do we're so lucky we have an incredible group on our Voices Committee.
And can I mention one thing about that also?
Yep.
So we are a member of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We call it CCAVV. We follow 83 standards to maintain that membership, and our confidentiality to work with victims, and our many funding sources come through the coalition. They're I believe, the statewide survivor leadership team you're talking about. So we've had Voices for a few years, and now some have also joined on to the statewide and also now onto the national. So it's pretty exciting. And I do want to say our coalition endorses this model tremendously.
Yeah, and it's been interesting. So the 2 members who participate on the National Voices Network, part of it is for them to bring ideas back to Safe Futures about what could we be doing differently and what could we be doing more of. But it's also an opportunity for them to talk about what Safe Futures is doing. And the good news is we are really on a good track based on what they're hearing from Voices members around the country. We are on a very good path. The other program that the Alliance for Hope strongly encourages Family Justice Centers to have is Camp Hope. and a Pathways program. Camp Hope is an evidence-based program. It's a 1-week sleepaway camp for summer, in the summer, and it applies a trauma-informed approach that emphasizes the campers' development, not their accomplishments. So it's not about who won the archery contest. It's about who pushed their comfort zones and tried something they were afraid to try. And the model is called Challenge by Choice. So no one is ever shamed or made to feel like less because they're not ready to try something. But what they are seeing is that the campers are really pushing themselves. There are, and there is a curriculum that Camp Hope America gives to the camp. So there are hope stories and hope heroes. So the kids learn to find hope in their lives, because we know that hope and a hopeful mindset is the antidote to trauma. And so the camp is really designed to teach these skills, a different way of thinking, and a belief system that is based on hope, which will help mitigate the effects of trauma. 1 week in the summer is not going to change the life of a child who has experienced trauma. So the Pathways is a year-round component where the children get together with adults. They're called Hope Coaches throughout the year. And it brings the children together with the Hope Coaches, but then there are also activities with the whole family, so that, bless you, so that it really is about healing not just the child, but the whole family unit. We just had Camp Hope last week, and there were 50 campers registered, 46 got on the bus. So we always have a couple who in the end are unable to go or too timid or whatever, but we had 46 campers attend last week, and they were all beaming when they got off the bus on Friday. So this year-round program is really about creating an ongoing supportive network for children who've experienced trauma.
And many of the children, because we're in our 5th year now of Camp Hope, even through COVID, and it has grown each year, many of them come back to camp every year. And now I think our first 17-year-old will be graduating to be a counselor next year, and they're so excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
And I
it's-
think Anne here is very involved with our Camp Hope program.
Yes. It really is. It is life-changing. And so in California, where they've had Camp Hope for 15 or 20 years probably, they've been able to track kind of the long-term trajectory of these children, and the results really are amazing. So it's a phenomenal opportunity. And the woman, Mariah Murdoch, who runs it for Safe Futures, is just an absolute star. So Kathy, I don't know if you want to talk about our partners.
These are our committed partners to the center, and actually it's growing. You know, now that everything's coming out, people know they're looking at the plans, they're looking, and they really want to be a part of this. Whether it's in a small way, a large way, we're really learning about those other partners that we didn't know about before, right? There's many different collaboratives are working under the radar to do so much wonderful work, and now they're coming to us, and it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing what we'll be able to offer our clients, our families, our future. It is something that, I always say to Marie, I may never see in my lifetime the generational change, but it's happening.
Yeah.
It is happening, and we do have to do something. Because again, working in the court system for 20 years, I know Ken working in law enforcement, Marie past law enforcement, we see the generations and we see the repetitive, and it's time. It's time for us as a society, as us together, as partners, to make change, and it's very exciting. Ken.
Who's that?
So that is, so as a young sergeant in the New London Police Department, probably there 26 or 27 years old, I developed a relationship with then the Women's Center. And in this particular case, this young man and his mother had fled a abusive relationship where his father actually kidnapped his mother, bludgeoned her, put her in the back of a car, and planned on killing and burying her. And he made the mistake of stopping for a cigarette. She escaped, and they ended up at the Women's Center in housing in New London, Connecticut. And so, as a young, street sergeant in New London, I took it upon myself to check on them. He was still at large, by the way. He hadn't been arrested, which is why they went from Stanford to New London. And so I developed a relationship with this young man and his mother and kept checking on them, letting the kid play in the police car, answering his questions, and just making sure they were safe while they were in New London until their father was arrested and incarcerated. So that's a young Anthony Pia. That is Lieutenant Anthony Pia of the Hartford Police Department. So fast forward to, I'm working for the Connecticut Chief State's Attorney's Office. I'm assigned to the Hartford Shooting Task Force. I'm working out of a closed middle school in the north end of Hartford, attacking violent street gangs. And I've been doing it for about a year. And one of the guys that I worked with was, at the time, Detective Anthony Pia from the Hartford Police Department. And we worked together for about a year. And then one day he walked in and he said, "Hey, Ken, I got to talk to you." And there was a strange look on his face. And I said, What, Anthony? What's wrong?" He said, "Well, we're moving my mom out of her house into assisted living, and we ran across that picture. And she said, "Hey, remember the police officer that used to look after us when we were in New London?" And he referred to New London as being a horrible time because, new kid in a new school and torn away from everything he knew, but also the first time that they felt ever safe in a very long time. And remember how he let you play in the police car, and that's one of the reasons you wanted to become a police officer? I said, "Yeah, so you thought you might want this picture. You remember him?" And he looked at the picture. "Do I remember him? I've been working with him for a year." That's Ken Edwards. And so he came and he spoke to our strategic planning session. And Tony and I still talk to each other. He's now in charge of major crimes for the Hartford Police Department, probably investigating every domestic homicide they have. So
He still reaches out. Everyone, let me know how I can help. Let me know what I can do. He's so committed and loves this project. Yeah.
So I keep that picture right there in my my little office at work, and not one that's up here, but one of him and I sitting at the table at the conference, and just a good reminder of some things that came out of a long law enforcement career.
And that's only one person that's gotten back to you?
That's just one.
Yeah.
Thousands of
Thousands.
people.
Just by luck, what's the chances that we get
And that's-
thrust together in the north end of Hartford?
And the fortunate thing for us is we get to continue to work with our survivors, our children through the year, because we have so many housing programs also that are dedicated to healthy relationships and community, how to build a community. Victims are so isolated when they're living in abuse. And one of our programs going from our shelter to our transitional living program, where they can stay there up to 2 years, they learn, there's 9 apartments in there, so they learn how to build relationships, how to learn to trust other people that they weren't allowed to before. And think about you can't trust your partner, how do you trust neighbors, right? But they learn to have meals together, to have holidays together. And our community is amazing with donations and really, especially around the holiday time. But then they learn to care for each other's children. And it's absolutely amazing. And after that 2 years, and those are the more extreme abuse cases. But then after 2 years, they're ready to go out on their own. And we have a rapid rehousing program that helps them to get there and then help them to sustain where they're going to move to, their apartment. But through those 2 years, they're also maybe working with their children in skills, but they're also education. Some victims have to change their identity. Some victims are so injured from head injuries, from strangulation, that they have traumatic brain injury. And if you just come into a shelter and go from place to place and you're released after a few months, it becomes a revolving door. So having all these multiple housing programs, we're able to assess victims after a few months. And sometimes people will say, well, why can't they make up their mind? And we say, well, sometimes the injuries they have sustained, they're not going to be able to. So it's our role to assess them, to get them the referrals. So we have medical teams we work with. We have TBI who can do an assessment, get them diagnosed, that we can get them on permanent disability. So when they do leave us, we're getting them into permanent supportive housing. So they are secure, their children are secure. And that's the real process of us working together and with our stakeholders, but as well as all of our partners working together. And again, not having to send victims all over the place to get there, because I couldn't manage what our survivors go through. I could not possibly manage. And I only had one child. So there's an anonymous family here in Southeastern Connecticut, so they're close to home, who absolutely love this model. They went and they walked the property. They came back to us and they said, we want to do something sort of unique. And we said, okay. They said, well, we're definitely going to make a pledge, but we'd love to do a matching gift. We would like to match up to $250,000. And we'd like to see if you could do it by the end of the year. And this was in May. And I am so excited to say that we have met that match.
Oh, wow.
They're an exciting thing. They may be interested in doing it again next year. We're kind of hoping, because we made that match so quickly. But we have a capital campaign committee, our director of development, our board, and they are all, again, so excited about this project that we're raising the money. And this is my favorite. I have to say my favorite part is where victims come first and professionals come together. It should not be that our children, our families have to go from place to place to place to place. And I know that screen, one of the things when I introduced this to the board of directors, now I had been there 23 years before I had the opportunity to go into this role. And I presented to them, and our team did, as a progressive dinner. So we have our board meetings every month, and they were up on the 3rd floor in our conference room.
Which is a walk-up, by the way.
It's a walk-up.
There's no elevator.
Yes, we have a very old building we're in, and there's no elevator. It happened to be a rainy night, cold night. So the board got there to have their meeting, and we had planned this, all of our team. And they'd come up one by one, and we had one staff up there saying, I'm sorry they had to move the meeting downstairs, but here, take a fork and a knife, because you're going to have dinner after. And then they went down to the 1st floor, and they said, well, I'm sorry, they had to move it to next door. So then they walked over to our Phoenix house next door, and there's a sign, meeting is in apartment 1. So they walked down the hall to apartment 1, and there's a sign on the door, sorry, closed at 5 o'clock. So we had them on a wild goose chase, and it went from place to place, but now they're getting it. Now they come back they send them over to the Career Center, and one of our staff members, bilingual, starts speaking to them in Spanish, and they're saying, Nat, talk to me. What are you doing? And she's pointing to go into another room. And, she would not break her language. And when they went into the other room, some, like, what is going on? Some a little frustrated, and I can't blame them. We sent them on a wild goose chase. And each place they went, they got another utensil, they got a plate, they got a can of soda, they got a napkin. When they went into this other room, it was all set up with a full meal. Everything you want for your dinner was there. And they said, this is what the Family Justice Center will be for our clients. And they still tell that story. But that was our whole team. And I said, I have an idea. Let's try it. And they were all bought into it. So, but it really sends that message of
One
the
very
change.
important thing is timing is everything. And when Kathy and I first started talking about this, I think I was working for the Chief State's Attorney's Office at the time. And we started talking, we could make this a reality, but everything didn't align. There's no way it would happen. police department, police chiefs weren't ready for it. They wouldn't want to expose themselves to advocates like that. And social service agencies were, like Kathy had said, afraid of jeopardizing some of their very vital funding by collaborating with somebody else. And the prosecutor's office, forget about it. There's no way they would have been involved with something like that. They looked at advocates, when I first started, they looked at advocates as enemies. And it took a while for all things to come into place, where when Kathy, I was at a fundraiser for Community Speaks Out, another organization, and Kathy was there. And she said, remember when you said you'd help me to get this go off this road? And I said, yeah, whatever you need. Yeah, okay. I need you to chair the committee. Sure, okay. But the timing was right, because when we first talked about it, the timing wasn't right. First of all, Kathy wasn't the CEO. She was in the trenches with the rest of us, right? And financially, Safe Futures really wasn't in a position to be able to do that back then. And then by the time this came around, Safe Futures was very financially sound. And yeah, you know what? We are in a position now to do it. And by the way, not only do we, like when I go to the steering committee meetings, and I don't know why, but everyone is a friend or somebody that I've dealt with my entire life. Or Denise, how long have we known each other?
I went to high school with his wife.
Yeah, 40 years. We've probably known each other 40 years. And Gino and I have vacationed together, the chairman of Safe Futures, and we're a bunch of Sound Community. I'm sorry, sorry, of Sound Community, and it's like everyone's on the same team.
Very passionate people.
So the timing is just right, where nobody's defending themselves; they're all propping each other up in the best way possible. So it's amazing.
And we're all professionals. And I think why I referenced the lethality assessment program we do with law enforcement, I'm a state and national and international trainer. And years ago, you're right, that wouldn't have worked. But when I say, I don't want to do your job, and you don't want to do my job, but how do we do this together? And I remember the first call I ever went on as 25 years ago with law enforcement. And I thought I knew everything. I'm the advocate. I know it all. I can't wait to get in that police car and go to that house, and I'm just going to save everybody. Honestly, that was my ignorant attitude. And when we got there, after we drove about 2,000 miles an hour, and I could barely get out of the car and walk because my knees were shaking after driving, and walking into the house, I realized I was not prepared. I was prepared for the victim who was ready to talk to me, ready to make that phone call, ready to make that safety plan. But an hour before this happened, this survivor, this amazing person, had no idea the police were going to be involved, had no idea their life was going to be turned around, upside down, or the trauma that they experienced. And I walked in, and the look to me was, why are you here in my house? And what are you going to do? Are you going to take my kids? Are you going to? And I just wanted to run. I didn't. But it took a while, but it helped me to see what our partners go through. And I think that's what we've done every step of the way, is really look at what are our partners going through, how can we help them, and how can they help us.
And we all bring a little different something to the table.
Absolutely.
Kathy and I staked out an apartment in the housing project in New London after a snowstorm, knowing it was garbage day, and this victim that just wouldn't talk to us was going to have to take her garbage out. And perhaps if we caught her when she was taking her garbage out, she'd talk to us. And sure enough, she takes her garbage out on garbage day. And Kathy and I stepped out of my unmarked car and said, hey, we're just here to help, really. We mean you no harm. And if it looks like we are, tell us to go away and we'll go away.
I'll never forget that day.
And we won her over. And I couldn't have done it myself, and I don't think Kathy could have done it herself. I was an inspector in the state's attorney's office at the time, and Kathy was working as a court advocate, and together we brought exactly what was needed to that particular moment, and changed that woman's life forever. So it really is, and I couldn't have done it. I didn't have what it took to get that done. Yeah. But I think my investigative background had us in the right place at the right time. So, It's been a journey. I get emotional sometimes because it's so different than when I started. My first law enforcement training, December of 1981, I was told by a very respected law enforcement officer that domestic violence was a family matter, arrest was a last resort. The best thing you can do is tell them to take a walk down to the corner bar. That's what I was told. And that's why I sought out the Women's Center, because that's not how I was raised, and I knew that was wrong, and I needed somebody to tell me otherwise. And that's why I went and found the Women's Center and said, hey, I need some tools on my tool belt. And that partnership has stayed, so.
And we don't let them go.
No, she does not.
Any questions anybody has?
Let's see.
We got some events.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Go.
So our annual walk is on Sunday, October 6th. Has the location? It's in Waterford.
Right, it's in Waterford. I just don't want to say, but it is within the same radius of where it would be. We just have to wait on a permit to see if it's moving across the street.
So the bottom line is follow us on Facebook or Instagram, and you will get to see the notices then. Once we have the date for the candlelight vigil, we will announce that. So if you follow us on social media, we'll be able to let you know the dates.
Yeah, and I will mention that one of the reasons is it has grown, and there's so many people, and we always have the big raffle baskets, but this year we're gonna have some crafters there. And there's food trucks, so it's a really fun morning. The walk kicks off at 9, but registration is about 8.
We partner, the Waterford High School Athletic Department sponsors it. And Sunday is the only day of the week that high school teams are not allowed to have any activities related to their sports. So
Plus, we used to do it at the Crystal Mall, which was great because it was all inside and the parking, and they can only do it Sunday morning because they didn't open till 11. But then they couldn't do it anymore, which is unfortunate.
yeah.
But also Waterford High School guarantees you don't have to change for a rain date because they'll move it inside. Yeah.
So if anyone's watching this recording, because this is being recorded, and their questions didn't get answered, or they have more of an interest, or they just want to see a little bit more, please reach out. I mean, through Safe Futures, they'll get a hold of me. If somebody wants to go walk the property, I love walking the property and showing people where things will be. One time I had little sticks with flags where the building was gonna be. I love talking about it. I love standing in front of the floor plan and talking about the flow. More than happy to meet somebody and talk to somebody about it. And as is anybody, including the staff at St. Futures, which, by the way, is fantastic.
They are. They are an amazing team. But I want to say one more thing about that property when we talk about Camp Hope and Pathways. So Camp Hope, there's a lot of these cabins out there when they go to camp and they stay in there. Now, we won't have overnight camp cabins, but we will have pathway cabins in the back of the property, so that we can do our pathway events, we can do our get-togethers on weekends, and children will feel like they're at camp. So that's really exciting.
There's a plateau on the top of the hill that kind of makes itself into a natural gathering place. I can see an amphitheater and some platforms, and it just makes perfect sense. It really is.
And Nature's Art Dinosaur Park is going to help us create the children's play area outside. Yeah, Linda and Roger.
Do you think eventually the annual walk will be on the property?
I believe it will be.
Yeah, that would be beautiful.
It should be,
Yeah.
I hope.
And even though the property is on Route 85, which is a busy road, once you walk into the property, you do not feel like you're on Route 85. It is quiet. The one word that kept coming to mind is serene. It's just a beautiful piece of land. We're so lucky we found it.
Shout out to Greg Massad, who chaired the building committee,
Yes.
who steered
Who's
us in
also
the
our
right,
board chair.
us in the right direction to find it, and
During COVID, the price had dropped tremendously and zeroed right in on it. Because we had looked at many properties, and you had to gut them, or you had to start over. There was no parking. It just wasn't conducive for what we wanted to do. And
I just want to say something. I worked for the Women's Center's Safe Futures for 25 years with children in the education program. But this Pathways program, I don't know whether you gave it enough, because one of the things about, I've been part of this and saw those kids, the day they went off, 46 kids, and have been involved with them in their programs, is we know that children who experience domestic violence, there's very high incidence of them becoming abusive. And this is really breaking the cycle. And you really see it with these kids because they feel supported, they know they're not alone, they're loved, and you're right, Mariah is an amazing leader. I mean, she handles any situation with hope and love and charity. So,
and that's a really good point, Ann, because the children that are coming to camp, I don't know if any of you have heard of, I'm sure Denise, you have ACE scores, Adverse Childhood Experiences, and some of our other audience here. So children with high ACE scores, like 4 or higher, are 1,300% more likely to become substance abuse users or substance users, to become homeless, to become incarcerated, to become a victim, or to become an offender, and it goes on and on. So we know these children are already sort of targeted by this score of not being successful in life. So what Camp Hope does, you can counter, as Marie said, adverse childhood experiences and that high ACE score with hope. How do you raise a child's hope? And that's what Camp Hope does. And you can't just raise it for that week. It is constant. And now we're looking at the older children being together twice a month, not once a month, but through the Pathways and Mentorship Program. And I think the national average is 95% of the children that attend Camp Hope and continue end up going to college, or having vocational school, whereas their chances with that high adverse childhood experience score was that would not happen in their lives. So it's absolutely amazing.
thank you so much.
All right, thank you.